So good morning, everybody. Welcome to Remo. Hope you had some fun playing around on the different tables there. We've got a lot of interactivity for you today with our speakers. So I want to make sure that we get started on time. So it's exactly 8 o'clock. And just a couple housekeeping items. We do not have any bathroom breaks scheduled this morning. So if you do need to step away, that's fine. The neat thing about Remo is that when we are in presentation mode, we can't see what you're doing. So if you need to step away, that's completely acceptable. This is a new platform for a lot of us, so I just wanted to share with you that if you do need some technical help, we've got two options for you. One is on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a Need Help chat box. And that is actually Remo's technical support. So if you need technical support, you can go ahead and click on that little red button, the question mark, and type in a question and they'll get back to you. The other option is, and it's more for the showcase at 9 o'clock, is Colleen and I will be bouncing around from the different tables. And if you need help, you can always put a note in the chat box, or you can, personal chat with us, or we'll stop in at your table. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those at that time too. So Colleen and I will also serve as your technical support in addition to the little help chat box at the bottom left-hand corner there. The other thing is we are going to ask that you remain at your tables during the presentation and not move around. When we get to the showcase at 9 o'clock, that'll give you the opportunity to play around a little bit more in Remo and bounce to the different tables and visit with some of the nonprofits, some of your friends, some of your classmates, and then we'll kind of guide you through that as we go between presentation and floor mode. As far as questions during the presentation, we are going to ask, if you'll notice there on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a chat box and there's also a Q&A. If you click on the Q&A, we are going to ask, we do have a scheduled question and answer session at the end of Nancy and Jeff's presentation today. So we'll take the last 15 minutes before we break into the nonprofit showcase on the floor. And so we're going to ask that if you do have any questions, to go ahead and put them in that box for the Q&A. And I will be monitoring that. And in the last 15 minutes after our presenters are done, I will share those questions with them and they will answer those live for you. Okay. We are going to be switching over to presentation mode, which is what we're in now. And so you will not see the floor, but you will see the PowerPoint and you will see the speakers. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on that in terms of what you're going to be seeing throughout the presentation. Okay. All right, so without further ado, because we are in a very tight schedule, and we have a lot of information to cover, I'm going to introduce our speakers. I think you've seen Nancy on the screen there already. She's going to be our first speaker today. And Nancy Wellner, just to kind of give you a little bit of a background on Nancy, she actually graduated from Leadership's class of 2012. Woohoo! The class of Rain or Shine. She was in my class, so I'm excited to work with her. It's been a few years, right? But Nancy also is a graduate of Cleveland Leadership Center Civic Leadership Institute, and she currently serves, just to give you a little bit of background because she's going to be talking to you about some board work, as she serves currently as a trustee for the Great Lakes Theater in Playhouse Square. She also volunteers on the Community Impact Committee for United Way of Greater Cleveland. She also has served 2 terms as a trustee for United Way of both Summit and, it's Medina County, but now it's Summit and Medina County, right? Because they merged. Right. And was a past member of the Living Well Medina County Steering Committee, which is it's going very strong here in Medina County. She and her husband, Paul, are involved as volunteers and or benefactors of a number of nonprofit organizations, including the Conservancy for Cuyahoga Valley National Park, Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and the Cleveland Institute of Music, as well as the St. Martin de Porres High School in Cleveland. She believes strongly that in a nonprofit sector as a unique strength of American democracy, and that all are called to be leaders and civically engaged in our communities. In addition to all that, she also holds a certificate in nonprofit management, so she is an expert, from the Mandel School at Case Western Reserve University, as well as a BA in zoology and a master's in technical and scientific communication from Miami University in Ohio.
A lifelong learner.
Yeah, she's pretty accomplished, isn't she? So we're going to turn this over to Nancy. She's got a presentation for us, and she's going to go over some of the basics of serving on the board. And then once she is done, then I will introduce you to Jeff Holland. So go ahead and take it away, Nancy.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope we've all had a chance to have a cup of coffee or a nice hot cup of tea, and that we're all wide awake and raring to go. The first thing we're going to do is learn how to do a text poll. And Colleen, are you going to jump in here, or has people already figured out how to work this?
Actually, you know what, Nancy? Thank you for reminding me. So yes, Colleen is going to pop up a poll, which you see right there. And you can actually increase the size of that by the right hand, on the right-hand corner of the poll. You can actually click on those 4 arrows that are pointing out, and that'll increase the size of the poll. So we're going to practice this in the beginning, because we will be referring back to the polling later this morning as well. So what we need you to do is we need you to pull out your cell phones, and this is pretty easy. All we need you to do is to text 22333, and Colleen's going to go ahead and put that in the chat box for you. So go ahead and text 22333, and then the message you're going to send, you're going to text that message to LMC 444. Some of you have already figured this out already. And then do not click the Poll Everywhere link. It should say that you've joined the poll, but do not click that link because it'll knock you out. And then you select your answer on the phone, and it'll populate there on the screen, and so we can actually track, the answers as they're coming in. It's live, and we'll be using this throughout the workshop. So looks like some of you have already started figuring this out. So please share with us which statement describes you best in terms of your experience with boards.
Okay. I'll give you a few more minutes here to get your answers in. So it's looking like most of you are volunteers but have no board experience yet.
That's great news for us today, isn't it, Nancy? Well, we've got a lot of great nonprofits looking for people today, and we know that our community needs volunteers. So I'm really excited about today's poll.
Awesome. Well, I think that even if you are a seasoned board member, perhaps this will be a nice review. And why don't we get started? Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can people see? Oops. Can people see the PowerPoint presentation? Oops. All right. I need some feedback here to make sure people can see it.
So everyone's saying no. So go ahead and try sharing again, Nancy. I think because I was sharing my screen.
Okay.
So try again.
All right. Hold on a second here. There we go. How about now?
No. Do you want me to try to bring it up, Nancy?
Well, then it's going to be harder for, I'll have to tell you how to change. I wonder why it's not working.
Yes.
I mean, because it'll be more difficult for me to change slides, won't it?
You can just tell me when to advance for you.
Okay.
Let's try that.
All right. Sounds good. We'll go ahead and have Terry pull it up.
So again, if you want to increase the size of this, then go ahead and let's see. All right, can you see that?
So you need to press on the arrow box in the upper right-hand corner, right, to expand it.
Great job. Yes, it's all the way up. And thank you, Terry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So can you please advance to the slide that says context and board service expectations.
There you go. There you go, Nancy.
All right. For my part of the training this morning, I will spend the first 15 to 20 minutes contextualizing the nonprofit sector and the importance of nonprofit board service. I'm then going to conclude with a high-level overview of what every board member should expect when they join a board. For Jeff's part of the presentation, he will get into more specifics on the legal obligations of nonprofit boards and the use of parliamentary procedures to help ensure successful board meetings. Next slide.
There you go.
Okay. To prepare this training for you, I've curated a number of resources that are very useful for those working in the nonprofit sector or serving on boards. And a list of all these resources is going to be emailed to you following the presentation, where you'll find links to helpful websites, webinars, YouTube videos, and there's even a podcast on there for your listening pleasure. Next slide. All right, let's get started. In the US, our economic and civic lives are organized by three main sectors: the public, private, and nonprofit. The public sector exists to serve the common good. Public sector organizations are part of the government. They are influenced by political trends and perspectives and are paid for by taxes. The private sector is driven by revenue and growth. Private sector organizations exist to produce a profit for their owners and shareholders, and they do this by meeting the wants and needs of customers who pay the owners for goods and services. The nonprofit sector exists to serve a social purpose, a constituency, or a cause. They have no individual owners, and in general, they seek to meet needs that neither of the other two sectors address. But to do this successfully, they have to raise sufficient funds to cover expenses to serve their missions, which brings us to the next slide.
There you go.
Clearing up a common misconception. What does the word nonprofit mean? What it doesn't mean is that an organization must lose money or that its employees must take a vow of poverty. In fact, the organization had better make a profit, or as I said before, it won't be able to fulfill its mission. The term nonprofit actually just refers to how the organization is incorporated at the state level. An organization files the necessary forms with the Secretary of State, and this provides the organization with certain liability protections. The terms tax exempt and nonprofit, while also used interchangeably, don't actually mean the same thing. Next slide.
There you go, Nancy.
Thank you, Terry. If a nonprofit wants tax exempt status, it applies to the IRS for a 501c tax exempt designation. The IRS then will assign one of 29 different 501c designations that are part of the Internal Revenue Code. And the graphic there lists all 29. I'm not sure you can read those, but for example, the American Civil Liberties Union and Common Cause are 501c4s. The Medina Chamber of Commerce is a 501c6, and Medina Hospital is a 501c3. The various nonprofit designations come with varying benefits. If you could advance the slide.
There you go.
Right. When most people think of nonprofits, they are typically thinking 501c3 organizations. Not only are they exempt from paying certain taxes at the federal, state, and local levels, but donations to these are also tax exempt for the donor. The organizations are called public charities and are mainly established for religious, educational, scientific, and a few other purposes, which you can read on the slide there if you can see it. They must serve a public purpose as opposed to championing the needs of a constituency. To maintain this favored tax status, 501c3s are expected to be politically neutral. They are not allowed to support or oppose a political candidate, but limited lobbying and advocacy is okay. Meanwhile, 501c4 and 6 organizations, for example, are generally trying to affect public policy and therefore allowed to lobby, but donations to them are not tax deductible. Next slide.
There you go.
So this slide is illustrating that the largest category of the 29 possible tax-exempt statuses is that of the 501c3. You can kind of get a feel for, that's by far the largest, and which the 501c4 and 6 are the next two, with the last category, all the other remaining 26 categories. Okay, next slide.
There you go.
How many are there of these 501c3 charities in the U.S.? Well, according to the National Council of Nonprofits, there were more than 1.4 million registered 501c3 public charities, including private foundations, in 2018. Foundations, as you may or may not be aware, are a type of 501c that make grants as their primary activity. Medina County Community Fund and the Cleveland Foundation are example of one type of foundation, a community foundation. Next slide.
There you go.
Okay, well, I should have blown that up more too. This slide is basically explaining that the vast majority of 501c3s nationally are pretty small. 88% spend less than $500,000 annually for their work. More than half, that big purple section there, are either church-affiliated organizations that are not required to file an annual information return, or they normally have gross revenue below $50,000, which is the threshold for filing information returns. If they're $50,000 or less, they're exempt from doing so. So the bottom line is that the typical nonprofit is small, community-based, and serving local needs. Next slide.
There you go.
All right, the nonprofit sector contributes in significant ways to our national, state, and local economies. Nationally, it employs more than 12 million Americans, similar to those employed in all of manufacturing and double the number of employees working in financial services. The sector contributes more than $300 billion in wages a year. Next slide.
There you go.
The nonprofit sector contributed an estimated $1 trillion in 2016 to the U.S. economy, or 5.6% of the GDP. Next slide.
There you go.
An estimated 10 million donors, 69% of whom are individuals versus foundations or corporations and the like, gave more than $449 billion in 2019. Americans are pretty generous. Next slide.
There you go.
Okay. In 2017, an estimated 64 million adults volunteered at a nonprofit, including as board members, at a value of approximately $195 billion. This represents an estimated 8.8 billion volunteer hours. Next slide.
There you go.
So why would you want to get involved in board service? Well, our muscular nonprofit sector is unique to our American democracy. This was observed by Frenchman and student of civil society, Alexis de Tocqueville, way back in the 1800s. He wrote a book in 1835 after traveling the US called Democracy in America. In it, he theorized that one of the reasons American democracy was so successful was due to our freedom of association. He noted that like-minded Americans were associating all the time to work for the common good or to advocate for change, just as we are doing today in big, big numbers. In fact, the nonprofit sector grew 4.5% in the 10 years from 2006 to 2016. Next slide.
There you go.
So our modern day nonprofits are where Americans come together to solve problems. They're promoters of civic engagement. They're the building blocks of democracy. They're laboratories where people learn leadership. And as we've seen, they are definitely economic engines. Next slide.
There you go.
So when talking about nonprofit board service, you'll often hear people say that what's expected are three things: time, talent, and treasure. Seems self-explanatory, but I wanted to go into it a little deeper and be a little more explicit about what's expected from my experience to be a really impactful board member. First, you should expect to be an enthusiastic ambassador for the organization. You'll want to identify and invite others to share your passion and interest to join you in the work. You'll never want to talk disparagingly about the organization, the people who work there, or your fellow board members. This may happen, like you may want to do this at times, because boards can get into heated discussions about debates and strategy and other issues, but you need to be confidential and classy in terms of holding yourself to a high standard. Secondly, you'll want to expect to make a stretch gift within your means. Often board members believe that they're giving a lot of their time, and of course time does have value, but you need to give both the time and treasure. You need to have both of those in the game. Foundations ask about board participation in their in annual giving for a particular nonprofit on grant applications, and often require 100% board participation when selecting grant recipients. And, you know, how can you expect others to give to your nonprofit organization if you're not giving? All right. Number three, you will want to think of your board service like a job and take it just as seriously. After all, you are going to get out of it what you put into it. There's a lot to learn, meetings to attend, events to attend. So it will at times feel like you've taken on a second job, especially at the beginning. But treating it seriously, not missing meetings, those are all things that make you a really impactful and serious board member. All right, next slide.
There you go.
Finally, expect to help with fundraising. Am I emphasizing this enough? In my experience, this is one of the one part of board service people are most afraid of. They're worried about having to make direct asks and just drop out of the whole process. Yet fundraising can be the most creative and entrepreneurial aspect of board service. For those of you who have any kind of sales experience, stewarding donors is like paying careful attention to your best customers. Part of the process is making sure donors are informed and thanked, invited to see your nonprofit in action, invited to all your fundraising events. You can and must help with this. Fundraising events are also a great way to introduce new potential donors to your organization. You know, I've seen lots of great ideas for fundraisers. You can really be creative with this, from 5K runs and cycling events to raffling unique experiences, live performances, silent auctions. I think people enjoy unique, creative, and educational ways to donate for a good cause. And then, of course, there is always, you know, the annual fund as well. And different organizations approach it differently, but it's a time to be creative and really think through who would enjoy, you know, being called to your cause. In other words, you need to embrace this aspect of your board service and don't be afraid of it. Next slide.
There you go.
Finally, oops, there we go. Before you do join a board, do a little research. Visit the website for mission and vision statements. Ask to attend a board meeting if possible. Look at annual reports and other published materials. Is there liability insurance? How long is a board term? What's the history of the organization? What are their major successes, greatest current challenges? I'd also recommend looking at financial documents of the organization. In other words, find out as much as you can. Maybe take a current board member or two out for coffee, and the executive director as well. It's a great way to get to know your fellow board members and learn about your shared interest, how to ensure the success of your nonprofit. And with that, I think we will turn it over to Jeff.
All right. All right, thank you, Nancy. Let's see here, come back. So that was a lot of great information. Thank you very much, Nancy. We appreciate it. So that's a little bit about the basics and the history and the impact of nonprofits here in the United States. We've also brought with us today Mr. Jeff Holland. Some of you may know him because he's all over the community and all over, he helps out a lot with leadership in Medina County. So his face is very familiar to us. But just a little bit about Jeff. He's going to talk to you about the legalities of sitting on a board and get into that really exciting topic of Robert's Rules, right, Jeff? So Jeff is a graduate of Denison University here in Ohio. And he also graduated from Franklin Pierce Law Center, which is now the New Hampshire School of Law. Apparently they changed names. And he's got his Juris Doctorate from that law school. He owns Holland and Muradin Attorneys at Law, and he's a partner there with his wife and Sharon Center. I'm actually learning a little bit about you here, Jeff. So he is actually the Wadsworth Municipal Court acting judge. So if you get a ticket in Wadsworth, do they get to meet you? And he's also an adjunct professor at Case Western Reserve University. And he is the Leadership Medina County Excellence in Public Service Award winner from 2018. And he is a graduate of the Leadership Medina County class of 1996. And a little bit about his board experience. Jeff has sat on a lot of boards, so he's going to be giving you a lot of great information. He is a trustee for the Medina County SPCA. He is a founder, president, and trustee, or he was, of the Medina County Land Conservancy. He is also, or was, a board member for the Medina County Community Fund. He's a class of, he graduated from the Leadership Ohio program. He is a board member. He's a past and current board member of Leadership Medina County. And I could go on and on, but I think that gives you a little bit about, Jeff's done a lot of board work. And so he's going to share with you some items about the legalities and Robert's Rules of board membership. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Welcome. I'm so glad to see all your shining faces here today. It's a beautiful day to be indoors looking at a computer screen. So I'm happy to have you here. I will tell you that I have found board service to be one of the best things that I have done in my professional career. It has helped my career because it's a great way to get people to know who you are. If you're passionate about something, you're working on a board, and people get to know you for that, and you have an honest interest in it anyway. So it's a great way to get your name out there and to meet other people. And it is not as intimidating as perhaps you think when you first get into it. What I would say is that being on the board of an organization is not a reward for good service in the past. It's a job. It's a job with its own job description. And so, for instance, we've had I've been on boards where we had somebody who was a terrific volunteer. Maybe it was, I don't know, might have been an outdoor organization, and this person cleared a lot of trails and built trails and planted trees and just put in a ton of work. And now you get people saying, well, that person should be on the board. Look at all the time they put in. But the skill set that is needed on the board may be different. Your board is going to want to be composed of a variety of people who have all kinds of different skill sets and so forth. So when you get on the board, you also have some legal duties. Don't be afraid of your legal duties. What are your legal duties? Well, I noticed that Nancy was having some trouble with her PowerPoint. Yeah, I'm not going to have any trouble with my PowerPoint because I always have handy Sharpies. And so thankfully, I was able to develop my own PowerPoint while Nancy was talking. And Folks, how do you calculate your legal duties? It's an important question. Calculate? Oh, well, that makes it easy to remember, doesn't it? Care, accounts, loyalty, and compliance. Calculate your legal duties. Duties of care, folks. What are the duties of care? We want to be active in the organization. You know, I tell you what, it's nice when you serve on a board, but when you serve on your board, it also gives you the opportunity to be criticized. The people who stay at home, this is a dirty little secret. People who stay at home and do nothing but watch Netflix never get criticized. People who take a leadership position get criticized. So we want to be able to be proud of our service, and that means being active. And so you don't want to just sit on a board table and be filling a seat. There are people who do that. And people begin to talk and they wonder, are you here to fill a resume? Is this part of your marketing plan? Nice to attend a meeting, but you got to be active. Keep informed. Hopefully you'll be given information before your board meetings, and you'll know what's going on with the organization. If somebody approaches you in the community, you should be able to say, I know what this organization is doing. I know what they're doing in the future and so forth. You need to understand the organization. See, I ran out of room here. But Nancy gave some good ideas about how to do that. You look at their website, you look at their published materials, look at some of the successes they've had, look at some of the challenges they've had, understand the organization. And as a board member, you're setting policy and you're overseeing whether or not policy is done correctly. Accounts. Hey, this is an important one. If you don't have money, you're not going to be able to act. So you as a board member are going to set the budget. Now, there are really two kinds of organizations, it seems to me, nonprofit organizations. One of them is one that has an executive director and one doesn't, or some other person who's running the show. There are lots of organizations where the board does everything. The board prepares the reports, the board monitors the website, the board does everything. Very different when you have an individual who's hired to run the organization. In that case, especially, you have somebody who is doing the day-to-day work of the organization, and your job is not to do the day-to-day work. If you try to do all the day-to-day work, then we now have an executive director that has 10 bosses, and that just isn't going to work. So one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to set a budget. That's going to be with the assistant of your executive director. You're going to have checks and balances so that one person isn't always in control of all the money all the time, and that we have a way of making sure that things are done correctly. And accounts are going to be prudently invested. Money's going to be prudently invested. And as Nancy said, fundraising, big issue. Loyalty. I think this is the most important one. If you have loyalty to the organization, you are a champion of the organization. Nancy mentioned this. How many times I have been at a function, maybe it's it's some dinner somewhere, or you go out golfing with somebody or whatever, and I say, how are things going on that board that you're on? And the person goes, oh, tell me all about it. I don't even want to say. Well, you're sending a pretty big message. Even if you think it's a good friend of yours, you're sending a message which is bad for your organization. Even if you have problems with the organization, your job is to settle it in-house if you can, just like your family. You don't go out and complaining about your spouse and your kids to all the people that you know in Medina County and all the people that you meet in your professional travels. You keep it in-house, folks. Obviously, if somebody's doing something illegal, then that's a totally different story. But generally, you should be able to resolve your problems within the organization. Be transparent. If you have some problems, you better bring them up. Worst thing in the world is to have a board meeting. Everybody votes yes on a motion. Later on, one of the board members says, stupidest idea I ever saw. But everybody else I saw was going along with it, so how could I vote no? It's okay to vote differently. You need to be transparent about your concerns. You need to be transparent about your next one, a potential conflicts of interest. What could be a conflict of interest? Well, if you or your family or your close friends could benefit from one of the acts of the organization, you have an obligation to make sure that everybody knows about it so it can be handled correctly. One of the questions that's asked of me a lot is, can a board member be paid for some of the things that they do? Let's say you had a board member who was maybe it's an animal welfare organization. You had a board member who's a veterinarian. Every once in a while, they come in and take care of an animal. You can do that. You can pay a board member for doing professional services, but you better make sure that you have shopped around so that you know this is a good deal, that the board member is completely transparent about what they're charging and so forth, and that that when the time comes to talk about this, the board member leaves the room, does not have any vote, and is completely divorced from any discussion having to do with how well they're doing or what they're being paid. There is a conflict of interest policy that you should be following, that your organization should have. And finally, compliance. Comply with your articles, bylaws, comply with the policies that you yourself probably are in charge of either establishing or creating, and know laws that pertain to your organization. How do you run a meeting? Well, I'll tell you what, it's really simple, but people get a little bit nervous about it. It's all about motion practice, really, because you could talk forever. Oh yes, I've been in those meetings where people go on and on and on, and you go from one subject to the next and so forth, and it never seems to end. Hopefully you've got a chairperson or a president who's a good timekeeper, but this is how you can help to keep an organization moving in the proper direction. If you want something to be discussed and for the organization to take action, make a motion. I move to always use colored Sharpies to make motions. Then someone has to second the motion if they think that's a good enough idea to even discuss. If there's no second to the motion, then you have no business taking up everybody's time talking about it. So if you've got at least one other person on the board who's willing to second the motion, now we move to discuss the motion. People get this backwards all the time. They have a discussion, and at the end of the discussion, when it seems like you're moving in the right direction, someone says, well, I'll make a motion. No. That's how it begins, because you have no business talking about this unless you are unless you have a motion to discuss. And then you vote on the motion. All right, here is a guy that we should all know. Henry Martin Robert. He wrote Robert's Rules. Henry Martin Robert says, if you have rules, then you will have hopefully a good, productive meeting so that everybody stays on task. So my view is that the rules are to serve you. You're not there to serve the rules. Don't get too caught up in it and all that, especially if everybody's on the same page. But if you will need some rules, and Robert says, follow the rules. Okay, I have some Robert's Rules quiz. We've got a little bit of time here for you. And so let's just launch right into that, because we're going to find out what you know about Robert's Rules and maybe learn some of this. Here is hypothetical question number 1. Here's the question. 10 people are on the board. A motion is made and seconded. 5 people vote in favor of the motion. 5 people vote against the motion. My question is, and you have, if you'll minimize my screen, if it's already up large, you'll see the options there on one of the other screens. What happens? A, the motion fails for a want of a majority. B, the president that casts the deciding vote. C, the matter is returned to the full body for further discussion. D, the matter is automatically tabled until the next meeting. And I see the votes are coming in. It's very exciting. It's going to be almost like Tuesday, but probably faster. Votes are coming in. You know, you can see what people are voting. So there's a certain amount of psychological pressure there already. And I am glad that I have votes on every one of these options, because if everybody voted for the same one and it was the correct one, then I'm teaching you nothing. And it's also nice that it's anonymous. Okay. Yeah, the answer is A. The motion fails for want of a majority. Lots of people, I think, and clearly most people here, or at least a plurality of people here, believe that a president casts a deciding vote. That actually could be in your bylaws to say that the president casts a deciding vote, but that's not Robert's rules and that's not Ohio law. You have to have a majority. If it's 5-5, then it's a tie vote. That means that the motion fails. Next question. 10 people are on a board. A majority of board members are needed for a quorum. There are 6 board members in attendance when the meeting begins. Halfway through the meeting, someone notices that one member, whose name is Alice, is not present. She must have quietly stepped out at some point. We all know this board member who says nothing and sits in the corner. A board member named David says, "Don't worry, Alice gave me her written proxy to vote on her behalf, just in case she had to leave early." What happens? A, David may use Alice's proxy to continue the meeting without interruption. B, the meeting may not continue because there's no quorum now, but everything that happened before that is valid. C, the meeting may not continue because there is no quorum now and everything that happened is null and void in the meeting because no one knows when Alice left the meeting. And D, there is no answer in Robert's rules. There is utter chaos. Utter chaos is where my meetings go sometimes. So I see votes coming in. I'm so glad that somebody votes for chaos. I'm a lawyer, so I always say that as long as people remain unreasonable, I'm in business. So we've got lots of votes coming in, and we're not going to give you too much time. I'm glad this technique is working. And we got a lot of people saying that the meeting may not continue. Everything that happened before is void. That is a very reasonable answer. But the way that Robert's rules work is that there is a quorum as long as there is at least a majority of board members that are available. And quorum ceases when somebody brings it to the attention of the chairperson that there is no longer a quorum. It doesn't go retroactively. So the answer is B. A quorum is presumed to continue to exist until the chair or any other member notices that a quorum is no longer present. Proxies are a great thing to use, but they're not in Robert's rules. And if they're in your bylaws, you can use proxies. Know your bylaws. They're not automatically allowed. Question number 3. Hypothetical number 3. Board member Taylor makes a motion to have a pizza party fundraiser. The motion is seconded. Discussion begins. The board member says, a board member named Fred says that the fundraiser is a great idea, but pizza is boring. Fred thinks that the event should feature pierogies. Taylor says, that's a great idea. I amend my motion to say that we should have a pierogi party fundraiser. What happens? And we've got A. The chair may accept a friendly amendment, which is approved by the maker of the motion. There should be discussion on the new pierogi idea and a vote on the amended motion. B. The maker of the motion may amend her motion, but the amendment must be seconded before it is discussed further. C. The maker of the motion may not amend the motion. The original motion for the pizza party must first be discussed and voted on. If that fails, there can be a new motion for a pierogi party. And D, there should be a vote on whether there is a pizza party or a pierogi party. We got to, there's not as much activity here. I think a lot of you are just saying, I don't know, right? What the heck? I don't see the numbers changing much here. So we got a few votes coming in. I'm hoping that you find that all of these potential answers are reasonable. I think that they are. So if you voted for the one that doesn't win, you can feel okay about that. And the answer is, drum roll, B, a motion is not the property of the mover, but of the assembly. Any amendment, friendly or otherwise, must be adopted by the full body. So looks like we did pretty well on that. Do you want to do any more, Terry and Colleen, or should we move on to questions?
Well, I think we're at a point, Jeff, where we should move on to questions if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Here to please.
Okay, we do have a couple questions in the question and answer box, and feel free to add any questions as we're going through these. We've got about 15 minutes left. So thank you very much, Jeff. And just so you know, as you begin to clean up your office from all those PowerPoint slides that you threw behind you, there were a lot of comments in the chat box that everybody loved your PowerPoint presentation. So thank you. Okay, first question to Jeff and Nancy is, where can you find financial information about a nonprofit? So if you're looking to serve on a nonprofit board and you're researching, like Nancy advises to do, how would you find out about their financial information?
Okay. So if it's not already posted on the website, there is a website called GuideStar, guidestar.org. And when they were originally founded, their purpose was to basically take all the 990s that every nonprofit has to fill out every year. If they're of a certain size, they have to, make reports to the IRS, and they post those on their website. So you would go there and you would just put in the name of the organization you're interested in, and they should bring up a lot of information for you. Now there is, to really do a deep dive, they expect you to pay for it, but there's a lot of information you can get on that website for free.
Yeah, so the IRS does post, and that I think that's a very good point. So the IRS posts a lot of their 990s on their own website right now.
So two good sources right there. All right. Oh, can't hear you, Terry. You have to turn on your mic. There you go.
Thank you. So we will have these resources available to you. Nancy was kind enough to put together, I think, a 2-page list of different resources that you can access after the workshop today. We'll send those out this afternoon to everybody along with the PowerPoint. So, okay. All right, let's see. So another question came in. Do most boards look to their volunteer population when seeking new board members? I think, Jeff, you touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that you often have people promoting somebody to the board who's already a volunteer, and that's may be great and may not be great. What I recommend is that you decide ahead of time, be deliberate about who you need on your board. So for instance, let's just take Leadership Medina County. One of the things that they want is they want people from various geographies in Medina County. You want people from Brunswick, from Medina, from Wadsworth, from Lodi, from Homer Township, various, all the places in Medina County. You might want somebody who is a lawyer, an accountant, whatever it is, mountain climber, or whatever these various professions are that might be able to give some advice and so forth to your board. So you should have a checklist of the kinds of people you want, as opposed to just promoting people that happen to have been long-term supporters.
Right. And I agree with Jeff. In my experience, a lot of nonprofits have a committee whose job it is to identify and vet potential board members. And they are looking for particular skill sets, and some other things that they need to bring to their board. They're looking for diversity of their constituency, making sure that their constituencies are represented on their board as well. So sometimes they can come from people who are volunteering. That's a great way to get to know an organization in case you are interested in board service. But you know, you don't they're not always going to look there first, is probably the short answer.
Question: what should you do if a board member doesn't keep confidentiality?
You take them out back and you beat them. That is a violation of your fiduciary duty. That board member is putting themselves and the organization into grave danger. If you violate your fiduciary duty, here's the deal. It is safe to work on a board, by the way, liability-wise. You have a liability shield. The organization, if it does something, you're not personally responsible for it unless you've committed a fraud or an illegal act. Well, you don't want to start violating your fiduciary duty in any way that you can. So violating confidentiality is a really, really big problem. And I'll tell you one way that it happens that can be pretty innocent is you tell your significant other all about the things that happened in executive session. And then your significant other, who you love so much, tells his friend and whatever, you know, and it gets out. And people also were sort of at the beginning of the electronic age still in 2020. And people don't seem to understand that if you send a text to a bunch of people or an email, it gets copied and spread and it's out of the barn.
Okay, so I would just like to add that you can be removed from board service. So you can get fired for doing these kinds of things. I think typically boards will have the chair reach out to the person and, you know, have a little conversation with them initially. And if the behavior continues, you can be removed from board service. Okay. I can.
Does a president, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Does a president have a vote?
Yes. The president's job is to run the meeting. That's it. The president can make motions. The president can second motions. The president can vote on motions. The president doesn't get an extra vote. It doesn't have extra powers for voting.
Okay. All right. Another question. Can you explain?
Unless the bylaws say otherwise.
Oh, okay. All right. So here's a good question. Can you explain the difference between a board member and a trustee? Because I know both of you have trustee experience too.
Well, my understanding is that they're just, you know, switching around the terminology, that they mean the same thing. You're a member of the board of trustees, or you're a member of the board of directors. And I think trustee, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, was originally used for foundations and trusts. That's where that term came from, but they're used interchangeably. That is where you can't use a nonprofit and tax exempt necessarily don't necessarily mean the same thing. A board member, a trustee, and a director all mean the same thing.
Nancy is absolutely right. I would say that the Ohio Revised Code says board of directors for nonprofits.
Nonprofits.
So, and the Ohio Revised Code also says code of regulations, not bylaws. But why would you say code of regulations? Because people don't know what that means. So people say bylaws, but the word bylaws is not really used in the Revised Code.
Okay. All right. A couple more here. We've got, how do you feel about board members having mandatory financial contribution expectations or suggested contributions as it relates to raising money and fiscal support?
I love it. I love it. I think it's a great idea.
Well, I think, you know, board members as I explained, there's an expectation that if you're going to be on the board, you're going to provide some financial support. And in my experience, there is you're asked every year, what kind of contribution are you going to make? Some of the boards require a minimum contribution to sit on them. Like the Cleveland Orchestra, if you want to be on that board, there is a big minimum distribution or minimum contribution.
And they often call it a give-get policy.
Right.
So you either give $100 or $1,000 or $10,000, whatever the amount of money is, or you get it from some source. So some people have the wherewithal to write a check or make a pledge of themselves. Some people have the connections to get that kind of money in. Other people, depending on the organization, they're going to work really hard on the fundraiser. And that's how they raise the money for their give-get policy. So there's absolute flexibility. My opinion is different than what you can do. What you can do is you can reach your fiduciary duty to make a sustainable, financially sustainable organization in many different ways.
So I just want to make clear that you don't need to be a wealthy person to sit on a nonprofit board. So there's a lot of ways to contribute to, just like Jeff was saying, to contribute to that minimum contribution. And many boards are willing to work with you about it and coming up with great ideas for fundraisers, really having a fun time with it. That's all part of that, your personal contribution.
Okay, great. All right, so let's see. I've got one more question here. Maybe there's two. How might a nonprofit board gain education in person for nominal cost per today's topics to perhaps get to a healthier state? Board I am on stale members.
Well, one of the ways I would say is that there are a lot of there's a lot of material that you can use through websites that will help you, if I'm understanding the question properly, take a look in a facilitated way what your board is doing and how to improve it through, for example, BoardSource is a great place for boards to go and look at all the material they have there. They offer webinars, they offer trainings, and I think you can even, you'd have to kind of investigate what your if you have a certain budget, where you can get some resources, a facilitator potentially to come in and help you kind of get the board less stale, as it were. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, what I heard from that is in person, and I do this, and I think there are lots of consultants and attorneys and other people who will go out on a private basis, meet with a board. They can do it virtually, they can do it in person, and answer questions, and it's very interactive, and it's very focused on what your board needs.
Okay. All right, and then there is one more question here. I think this is an extension of the previous question. Actually, we've got two questions that came in from the previous one. So who would those people be?
Who would what people be?
That's what they said.
Jeff just said he's one. He does nonprofit board consultations, correct? That's what I think. They're still talking about the last question.
Oh, yeah, I think that there are people who do nonprofit board consulting,
yes,
and legal advice and so forth. There are a lot of people who do that.
Okay. And then plus, doesn't board contributions, this goes back to the board contributions and the financial commitments, doesn't board contributions help when going to funding sources to raise capital for the organization?
Absolutely. Most foundations are looking for, and they are places where you go to get grants for your organization. And they are looking for 100% board participation. It's one of the things they're going to ask about on the grant application.
Okay. All And I think that's it. There were a couple questions here about if you would be okay sharing your contact information with the group, just because they've would like to speak with you individually. I will share with the group that we do have, when we're going to go back to the floor now for the nonprofit showcase, and we do have a speakers table up in the top left-hand corner, and Jeff and Nancy will be available at the speakers table to, if you want to pop in to see them, you can visit with them and ask any questions that you still have individually of them. And there were a couple folks asking about the resources, Nancy. So I just want to reiterate that there will be this afternoon, I'll send out an email after the workshop with the in True Leadership Medina County form. There will be an evaluation, but we will also include Nancy's PowerPoint presentation, the resources that Nancy referenced in terms of where you can go to get some more board servant information. And we will also include, Jeff, I have to ask you, because this came up in the chat box as well. They wanted to know if you would scan your PowerPoint and share it with us so that we could include it in the handouts that we send out later today. All right. So that'll wrap up our question and answers in the workshop. So thank you very much, Nancy and Jeff. And again, they'll be available on the floor. So we're going to switch over to the floor mode now. And just a few tips here. We are going to, in order to move, if you didn't get in early enough to practice or watch the video, in order to move from table to table, all you have to do is take your profile and click on the table that you want to go to and click on that twice, and it will move you there. There will be a little bit of a delay, but you'll get there, rest assured. And we are going to wrap up the floor at 10:15. So you've got about an hour to meet with. I think we've got 15, well, wait a second, a couple folks I just got messaged didn't show up. So I think we've got about 13 nonprofits that you can visit with. And I know we sent that list out yesterday. And I believe the big brothers and big sisters of Summit and Medina and Stark counties, I don't think Kyle was able to make it in, so they won't be here today. And neither will the Isaac Walton League. Brenda Swartz wasn't able to make it either. So I just wanted to give you that information. But you do have the list, so if you did want to follow up with them afterwards on your own, you're more than welcome to do that. I did get a chance to talk with Kyle at Big Brothers, and I know that they're really looking for some volunteers. So if you want to get involved with them, you can do that. We're going to give you about, with the 13 nonprofits that are here, we are going to give you about 6 or 7 minutes or so. I shouldn't say we're going to give it to you, but if you want to meet with all of them, you'll want to kind of block out 6 or 7 minutes to meet with each one of them. Announcements for you to let you know when that time is up, so you don't have to watch that timer yourself. But if you've targeted some folks that you want to meet with, I would say meet with them first, and then make your way around the floor and meet with the other nonprofits, because these are all folks that are looking for either board members currently or in the near future, or volunteers. So there's a lot of volunteer opportunities with the fundraising that's going on these days with their nonprofits. And so I would encourage you to ask about those. And I think that's really about it. Colleen, can you think of anything else?
Nope, I think you've covered everything. So I look forward to seeing everybody on the floor.
Okay, so you ready to go bopping around virtually? All right, let's do this.